Sometimes planning can mess up. Sometimes you mess your own planning up. For instance, walking while reading can be dangerous. This bandage on my head is because I'm so addicted to trying to get things done while walking that I was reviewing slides for my Christianity and Social Justice class on Friday morning and walked right into a metal box that closes the door in the library stairwell and learned once again that the best laid plans don't work out as we wish all the time. What do you think about plans? In a few minutes, I'm going to read some verses from Jeremiah 29, but not that one about plans. We'll talk about it in a minute. That one that is so ubiquitous in Christian kitsch, Christian decorating. I don't mean to offend. It's a powerful verse to remind us that in the midst of all kinds of things, God still does have a plan. Maybe it's in your office or your York Seminary Village residence or in your home. 29:11 is a powerful reminder that God is watching over God's people. But the lectionary doesn't include it for us this week. Now, you'll see I'm about to add some verses, so I'm not opposed to doing that. But we'll stop before this planning. God knows the plans that are there for us, plans for our prosperity and not for our harm, plans to give us hope in a future. But what if we're looking for God's plans in the wrong spot? Sometimes we just mess up good planning, don't we? Now, I'm an over-planner. In the season when I had decided it was time to watch for a teaching position, right? Suddenly it was time to scour the job boards. I was on them so much that they still show up as options on my iPhone. Like when I try to go to a new site, it still sends me to the Chronicle and it still sends me to the CCCU site, like it's early options. I can remember spending so much time scouring these job boards, looking into universities, researching the cost of living, looking at where hospitals would be close to these schools to make sure that it was a place where my wife Jill could theoretically work, to the point that I kept reminding myself, you're going through all this planning at the expense of finishing the thing that is required for you to be in this place in the first place. Or during tax season, as a minister, we had this housing provided for us, which was great, but the tax bill wasn't always great. And so as soon as I could imagine of what we might, I was like planning and planning and planning and planning. And I would go in and out of TurboTax, probably logging in and out of that thing 25 times before I had all the information that I could actually put, just trying and just wasting so much time planning. Now, maybe I'm the only one spending time planning things that won't happen, or planning things that don't really matter, or planning things in a way that undoes the whole point of planning. But yet, I'm sure come December, I'll struggle once again to just leave it be until I have all my all my documents. What about you? Does your planning ever consume you in ways that take away from the whole point of the project of planning? This morning, our text will draw us into Judah's experience of exile and the decisions and the temptations that surround their decisions before we get to that promise of God's plans. So let's listen for God's word in these verses. I'm going to read verse 1, and then skip some important context that hopefully you'll pick up later. And then we'll read verses 4, and I'm going to go on to 9, because I just don't like where the lectionary stopped. This is the text of the letter that the prophet Jeremiah sent from Jerusalem to the surviving elders among the exiles and to the priests, the prophets, and all the other people Nebuchadnezzar had carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord. So Jeremiah is speaking to those who are exiled. My teacher called them the upper crust. That's what was taken away in 597. As 2 Kings 24, 14-16 tells us, it's this 10,000 of the leaders, all of the strong in the army, all of the educated, all of the leaders. I hope you can imagine this context. That those who were accustomed to a level of power and prestige in Judah have been taken away to Babylon. Those who were equipped to read and to know the law, those who were given authority to enact and enforce the law, those who fought to defend and expand Judah's understanding of the law, all find themselves in a foreign land. And I at least can picture them, hope you can too, anxiously awaiting God's direct intervention to immediately return them to their roles in Jerusalem. Can't you picture them with a bag packed, almost like it's the Passover once again, ready for that promise to David's line to come true and that they will immediately be returned? We know this stuff. We've read this thing. We've seen these promises. It's going to happen immediately. Surely, God's plan is to bring us back to Zion. Now, you and I obviously gather and worship today in an incomparably more pleasant situation than the Babylonian exile, right? We get that. So as I make a comparison here, we understand that we're not trying to equate. And yet the allegorical interpretive muscles inside all of us can probably quickly identify connection points between our experience here this week as a university, even more personally as a seminary, grieving, changes. I don't think it's much of a stretch to imagine Jeremiah seeking to answer the question that was being asked of him. What should we do now? Now that we are in exile, now that leaders are gone, for us, now that we know what we know, now that we are encountered with this situation, it's a question that confronts us seemingly every day. What do we do now? Here at AU and within the School of Theology and Christian Ministry, we're less than a day removed from the knowledge that things we hold dear are changing. Programs and people are affected. People all around campus wrestling with what this is going to mean. Oh, wouldn't we all just give anything to just make it go back? To immediately fix things to how they were. To suddenly have an endowment that meant students could all come without concern for cost or debt. To suddenly have a church that is flourishing to the point that every graduate walks out of here with a healthy pastoral staff ready to receive them and continue to nurture the education that's happening, ready to have 2,000 undergraduates again. To suddenly and immediately make it to where every pastor gets an appropriate sabbatical year and support, and the congregation is properly staffed while they take some time to rest and to heal. Wouldn't we all across campus want to just, like I can picture those scribes and those leaders, say, my bag is still packed, I'm still ready. Let's just go back. For those of you pastoring, your congregations are made up of people that are probably facing uncertainty in different ways. Anxiety about the future and asking God, what do I do now? Church attendance is waning for a lot of our churches. The world of seminary education is changing. The people in our congregations and all of our congregations in contexts of ministry are changing. And we don't usually like it. I had a member in my church in Milwaukee that had instituted a Sunday lunch rule with his extended family. It was called the "No Conversation Starts with We Used to." Now this guy, I promise you, he had an awareness and an appreciation for history. He wasn't against history. But he was making this point that we spend so much of our time in these lunches together of, oh, but remember when we used to have 2 pastors? Remember when we used to have more people? Remember when we used to have whatever it is that we long for? I sort of liken his approach to that of President Bartlett and then subsequently all the other cast and staff members that some of us might be longing for actually being in this election cycle. Santos Vinnick ticket, we could go for that. Where he would say, I got it, what's next, right? Those of you who watched The West Wing, there was this idea, okay, I got it, what's next? Let's move on. The thing is that the temptation for us in times of what should we do now comes with a lot of options that aren't always what God's plans for us are, even if they are plans. It's hard to see God's plan instead of the ones we make for ourselves. It's easy and tempting to dig into our wells of what has worked before. I can imagine the Judahites in exile, I think that's how you say it, Judahites in exile, brainstorming what it would mean to destroy the Asherah poles and return to the Book of the Covenant, a la Hezekiah and Josiah, and say, hey, this worked before, let's figure out what that would mean for us right now to do that. In our ministries now and into the future, we will all experience challenges and opportunities that we aren't expecting or wanting to have to lead through. But hopefully we've prepared and planned to discern the way forward. It's tempting to accept a few alternatives. I'm going to just throw some out. I'm sure that you've experienced more than just this. There's always that opportunity to just cling to dogged, uncritical optimism. Just going to sit here, and God's going to fix it. It's not a bad thing to expect God to fix it, but to just sit here passively, I don't have to do anything. God will just come swoop me up. The other option, the easy road of assimilating to a culture that encourages us to wed our worship to its sacred symbols. You can thrive and flourish. Just accept a little of what we have to offer, and we'll supplement what you need. Judah was definitely confronted with this in Babylon. You can worship your God, that's all right. Just bring along Marduk, okay? Marduk is pleasant. He'll get along with Yahweh, it's all right. Our temptations resort to whatever it takes to get rear ends in the seats, resort to whatever it takes to market and sell your church, resort to whatever it takes to fit into whatever our society tells us church is supposed to look like. Or the third option is just to give up hope and just give in, just quit. These false alternatives come with some verbs or some verbal phrases. Wait. Be passive. Embrace the change. Just sit and pray. Just sing the old song once more. quit. These false alternatives come with some verbs that are not the ones that Jeremiah puts before us as God's answer to the question that Judah was asking. So now what? We get some different action verbs here, don't we? Build and settle down. Plant and eat. Marry and have children. Give your children over to have children. It doesn't take much to see the echoes of the original creation, does it? Settle in. Build, nurture, dig, eat, marry, produce, reproduce, grow. God speaks through Jeremiah to offer us a different picture than that one that we might be tempted to say, this is what we do now in this question of now what? And it's a picture that is both a return, but not what we're probably first tempted to understand as a return. It's a return to accept God's calling to see our flourishing and being a blessing. You will be blessed in being a blessing, God told Abraham. Your prosperity will come in the prosperity of these people that you hate. Jeremiah tells Judah. What we get is a picture of mundane activities of life. Now, weddings today, they're a pretty big deal and all. I get that. But, I mean, these are like the kinds of activities that a lot of people go through, right? Building, settling, planting, eating, marrying, having children, hopefully watching grandchildren, things that we probably envision as possibilities in our lives, not something supernatural or special. Everyday life. We get a picture of actions that are increasingly separated in our world from our theological imagination, and that often get thought of in terms of consumption today, but should be reclaimed theologically. Seek the welfare of its city. In it you will find yours. Now, this is perhaps a concept that you saw me headed this way as soon as you heard, oh, he's going to preach 29. All right. Seek the peace of the city. I realize that this is a precocious congregation. You guys are the superheroes of church. This might be your third sermon on Jeremiah 29 this week. I don't know. We're probably averaging 3 sermons in a week span here when we look around, right? I'm going to guess that most of us get it, that our task is to seek the welfare of those around us. I don't pretend that I'm teaching you that. I think this group gets that. I'm going to guess that most of us get it, that our task is to seek the welfare of the city instead of uncritical optimism, syncretistic nationalist patriotism, or quitting. I bet for most of you, the bigger challenge is the one that hits me too. And it comes to us in those often skipped over verses 8 and 9. You see, we love seek the welfare of the city. And we love, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper and give you hope in the future. But in order to do those things and to experience the hope that God has for us and the future God wants for us, we have to watch out. Notice what Jeremiah says right after, if the city prospers, you will prosper. He says again, yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. Sometimes we create our own echo chambers of inviting others to affirm in us our wisdom as leaders. This is clearly the way it must be forward. We have to be careful that too often we listen to the dreams and solutions that we encourage the diviners among us to give us back. we're tempted to weed out the mundane actions of holy living, holistic worship, prayerful service, and Christological generosity. Building, planting, eating, marrying, giving birth. And we give over these things that we can actually all participate in, all do that will bring about the prosperity of those around us and will enable God to provide for us the hope and future that is there for us. And we give that stuff up for the latest quick fix that we invite our cultural diviners to concoct for us. What's the quick solution to fix my church attendance problem? What's the quick solution for us to fix our enrollment? What's the quick solution for me to fix my marriage or my parenting or my whatever? What if what's next is the difficult task of daily building, planting, marrying, birthing? What if our university, our seminary, our churches, our nonprofits that we're preparing to go and lead, and we ourselves are being called back to the slow and steady growth of doing the holy mundane tasks that God's people have been called to do in order to be a blessing since the call of Abraham? Take root, build, grow, plant. Add to the family of God one by one. One conversion, one marriage, one birth at a time. God's people had to take their new context seriously. There really was something new that needed to be done for Judah. They had to do something in order to answer the pressing question, what should we do now? But even in our safer context, we too must seek discernment to know the way forward with God may just require living. Living the things that God has been teaching us throughout our discipleship. Not the dreams we encourage the diviners to offer on our behalf. We may want it, we may try it, and God may say, those are lies that are not from me. I did not send you that solution. You will be blessed as you dig in and become a blessing to whatever I have sent you to do. Whether it's the context you want to be in or the one where I have sent you. Let us pray.